Human history is built on great discoveries, but this video is about the exact opposite. We gathered 50 times an aggressively confident guy handed his drink to a buddy and instantly defied basic physics, common sense, and his own survival instinct. Watch grown adults brutally test their health insurance limits. 1. Let's start with a guy from Kentucky who genuinely believed his rib cage was exempt from the laws of physics. To prove Isaac Newton was a hack, he stood in front of a moving golf cart, fully intending to stop it with his bare chest. His buddy was driving at the speed of a heavily sedated tortoise. But here is a fun science fact. Battery-powered vehicles do not care about your ego. The man folded over the plastic hood like a cheap lawn chair, making a pathetic wheezing noise. Newton remains the undisputed champion of gravity and momentum. 2. Aspiring internet celebrities will do literally anything for views, including turning their own homes into deep-sea disaster zones. One backyard, Spielberg dragged a military-grade weather balloon down his basement stairs and pumped it full of tap water until it rivaled the size of a minivan. The master plan was to pop it and film the splash in slow motion. He completely ignored the crushing hydrostatic pressure of a literal ton of liquid. The rubber gave up early, unleashing an aggressive tidal wave that pinned him to the drywall and instantly flooded his entire man cave. 3. Yard work is boring, which is exactly why a suburban dad decided to speedrun his autumn chores using a generous splash of unleaded gasoline. Staring down a stubborn, damp pile of oak leaves, he tossed a match, expecting a cozy little campfire to help things along. Instead, he summoned a localized meteor strike. The resulting shockwave vaporized his eyebrows on the spot and launched him backward through the crisp fall air. His majestic flight ended violently inside his own inflatable holiday snowman, which promptly melted around him in a depressing, plastic hug of absolute defeat. 4. If you ever find yourself complaining about nosebleed seats at an outdoor music festival, please resist the urge to scale the stage equipment. Seeking the ultimate VIP view, one determined fan climbed a towering metal speaker scaffold like a highly caffeinated spider monkey. He was actually making decent progress right up until the DJ dropped the heavy bass. The sheer, bone-rattling vibration of 100,000 watts shook him loose like a ripe apple. He tumbled through the metal pipes, landing in a deeply undignified heap right next to the $300 merchandise tent. 5. Armed with nothing but pure arrogance and a 5-minute internet tutorial, a confident homeowner decided that professional electricians were basically scam artists. His mission was to wire a heavy-duty ceiling fan entirely by himself. After twisting some random cables together and aggressively flipping the breaker, the fixture actually whirred to life. However, instead of providing a gentle summer breeze, it engaged in a violently aggressive, wobbling death spiral. Within seconds, the entire motor ripped itself out of the drywall, flew across the living room, and embedded its blades deeply into his brand-new television screen. 6. Securing your property requires at least a basic level of emotional stability, a trait this particular guy completely lacked. While balancing on a tall aluminum ladder to install a new surveillance camera, he told his buddy to run at him screaming to test the motion sensor. The good news is that the digital alarm worked flawlessly. The bad news is that his friend deserves an Oscar for playing a terrifying psycho. The homeowner was so genuinely spooked by the sudden screaming that he panicked, fell backward off the top rung, and successfully crushed the exact camera he just bought. 7. Jumping out of a moving vehicle to dance for a video is always a terrible idea, but doing it at a prestigious country club is absolute financial suicide. One guy figured he would look incredibly cool, ghost-riding his golf cart past the clubhouse. Unfortunately, he left the steering wheel cranked just a tiny fraction of an inch to the right. As he kept violently dancing, his driverless buggy embarked on a relentless journey of destruction, driving directly into a neatly lined row of premium multi-thousand-dollar golf bags. It was a beautiful, slow-motion domino effect of pure ruin. 8. There is always that one guy at a house party who genuinely believes he possesses the skills of a master mixologist just because he owns a cocktail shaker. Desperate for attention, our hero attempted to juggle 3 full bottles of heavily aged, top-shelf bourbon in the kitchen. Sadly, he looked less like Tom Cruise and more like a panicked toddler trying to catch wet fish. gravity won the argument almost immediately. The resulting massive crash covered the linoleum in hundreds of dollars worth of premium liquor, shattered glass, and the lingering scent of deeply flawed life choices. 9. In a breathtaking display of adult stupidity, two bored friends actually invented the highly dangerous sport of suburban hot dog jousting. The rules were terrifyingly simple. They would ride bicycles straight at each other while wielding rock-solid, completely frozen frankfurters as medieval lances. The inaugural championship match lasted exactly 4 seconds. It abruptly concluded when one of the brave riders took a frozen meat missile directly to his left eye socket with pinpoint accuracy. The real tragedy was not the painful injury, but the deeply humiliating conversation he had to have with the emergency room doctor. 10. Every neighborhood has a self-proclaimed barbecue king, but this guy decided to take his grilling impatience to a highly combustible level. Frustrated that his charcoal wasn't heating up fast enough, he bypassed the regular lighter fluid and reached for a bottle of high-proof rum. Tossing a lit match onto that alcohol-soaked pile did not start a cozy cooking fire. It ignited a literal jet engine. A massive wall of flame erupted outward, instantly incinerating every single hair on his arms while flash carbonizing 24 expensive sausages into solid, inedible black rods of culinary shame. 11. When an expensive camera drone gets hopelessly tangled in the upper branches of an oak tree, rational people simply grab a tall ladder. This guy, however, tapped into his inner Australian and decided the most logical retrieval tool was a heavy wooden boomerang. He wound up and threw the curved stick with all his might. Naturally, the ancient weapon completely missed the tangled electronics, carved a majestic, sweeping arc through the afternoon sky, and returned right on schedule to smack him squarely in the back of his skull. The drone remained perfectly secure in its leafy fortress. 12. Holiday crafts are supposed to be a fun family bonding activity. But one aggressive dad decided that traditional carving knives were for weaklings and brought out a high-torque power drill for maximum pumpkin efficiency. He applied serious pressure to create the perfect spooky eye, but the drill bit immediately caught the tough orange skin and skittered wildly. He managed to turn a cheerful jack-o'-lantern grin into a terrifying, mangled wound before plunging the metal bit straight through the bottom. He successfully created a permanent ventilation hole directly through his wife's cherished antique dining room table. 13. Trying to proudly prove that he had not aged a single day since elementary school, a grown man somehow convinced himself he could squeeze into a hard plastic bucket swing meant exclusively for toddlers. Through sheer willpower and a lot of unnatural squishing, he actually got his lower half in. The problem was the absolute physical impossibility of getting back out. His hips locked firmly into the thick plastic, totally trapping him. Ultimately, the local fire department had to be dispatched with heavy rescue equipment to meticulously cut him free, while a massive audience of highly amused 6-year-olds laughed. 14. In a moment of absolute brain emptiness, a woman confidently assured her dinner guests that she knew a top-secret trick to get her expensive jewelry incredibly shiny. Her absolute genius method involved dropping her massive diamond engagement ring directly into a running kitchen garbage disposal for a quick scrub. The immediate, horrific sound of heavy steel blades violently grinding against precious metal was enough to make everyone in the room physically sick. When she finally fished it out of the dark drain, the ring looked like it had lost a bare-knuckle boxing match against an industrial rock crusher. 15. Nobody likes a loud show-off, especially one who permanently damages the house. During a busy holiday gathering, a guest loudly declared that real men do not need fancy bottle openers to enjoy a beverage. He confidently slammed the metal cap of his glass bottle against the edge of a pristine, custom granite countertop and pushed down hard. Well, he definitely got the cold beer open, but he also simultaneously snapped off an incredibly sharp, half-moon-shaped chunk of the $1,000 stone surface. The absolute silence that followed was broken only by the terrifying death glare from the furious host. 16. Safety regulations exist for a reason, but one backyard mechanic openly scoffed at the idea of using actual heavy steel jackstands. He called them a pathetic scam invented by corporate lawyers. Instead, he proudly hoisted his massive pickup truck onto a wobbly pyramid of old cinder blocks. As you might easily expect, one of those ancient concrete blocks simply gave up and disintegrated entirely into dust under the immense pressure. The entire truck slammed violently to the pavement, miraculously missing his skull, but completely flattening his brand-new rolling tool cabinet into a useless metal pancake. 17. Taking inspiration directly from animated Saturday morning cartoons, a bored adult decided that normally walking down the stairs was simply too mainstream. He eagerly grabbed a heavy metal serving tray, sat firmly on it at the top of a steep, heavily carpeted staircase, and pushed off. For exactly 2 feet, he experienced glorious, frictionless speed. Then, pure physics rudely took over. The slick tray shot completely out from under his rear end, immediately turning his body into a flailing human pinball. He bounced brutally down all 28 steps, making heavy contact with absolutely every single bone. 18. Skiing properly requires finesse and careful turning, 2 complex concepts completely ignored by a guy who looked at a steep black diamond slope and decided a straight vertical drop was the most efficient route. He tucked his arms in and achieved terrifying breakneck speed for about 10 glorious seconds. Then he hit a solid, deeply unforgiving patch of sheer mountain ice. He launched forcefully into the thin air and landed face first in a deep pile of powder, executing a flawless, spine-bending full scorpion pose. His skis and metal poles exploded outward, decorating the mountainside like a massive yard sale. 19. Teenagers have an incredible, almost magical knack for answering questions that literally no one on Earth has ever asked. To bizarrely test the durability of thin metal packaging, one kid aimed a high-powered pellet gun at a full, highly pressurized can of bright spray paint. When the metal projectile hit, the can did not just spring a small leak, it violently detonated like a colorful hand grenade. The blast instantly coated the shooter, his hysterical friend, and his father's incredibly expensive, pure white show poodle, in a thick, sticky, and completely permanent shade of highly visible emergency construction orange. 20. The local gym is always full of incredibly big egos, but attempting a massive, heavy lift while totally alone is a guaranteed recipe for absolute disaster. A guy boldly proclaimed he knew his exact physical limits right before loading up a heavily bowed barbell with 400 pounds of solid iron, entirely skipping the need for a spotter. As soon as he unhooked the bar, his shaking triceps instantly surrendered. The massive weight plummeted directly onto his chest, securely pinning him to the bench. The horrific noise that followed was a gut-wrenching combination of a desperate gasp and cracking ribs. 21. A local outdoor Renaissance fair took a sharp turn into chaotic absurdity when a fully grown man, clad head to toe in authentic steel plate armor, aggressively challenged a buddy to a duel. Their noble steeds of choice were tiny children's plastic tricycles. His terrifying, heavily armored charge was wobbly, painfully slow, and ended abruptly when his center of gravity shifted. He tipped over sideways in slow motion, hitting the dirt with a loud metallic crash. Trapped securely under 80 pounds of unforgiving steel, he could do absolutely nothing but lie there, clanking helplessly while the crowd roared with laughter. 22. Truly believing he possessed the natural grace of an Olympic gold medalist, a man climbed onto his steep roof for the ultimate pool party entrance. He took a mighty running leap, aiming directly for the deep end of his backyard swimming pool. Unfortunately, he drastically miscalculated the forward trajectory of his own heavy body. He completely overshot the sparkling water and plummeted directly into the absolute worst possible landing zone. He crashed squarely into his wife's aggressively thorny, heavily guarded prize-winning rose bushes. The neighborhood was treated to a terrifying symphony of snapping branches and a distinctly high-pitched scream. 23. There is absolutely nothing quite like a boat captain, incredibly eager to prove how wildly cool he is to a group of nervous passengers. In a desperate attempt to showcase his nautical agility, the driver yelled a classic warning and violently yanked the steering wheel to execute a razor-sharp turn. The small fishing vessel responded beautifully and carved a perfect arc through the water. The captain, however, forgot to actually hold on to anything. He was immediately launched straight over the console by pure centrifugal force, violently skipping across the lake while his unmanned boat continued spinning in tight circles. 24. Standard lawn maintenance should never be treated as an extreme sport. Yet, one homeowner saw his wet, freshly cut grass as the perfect slippery drift track. Bragging loudly about the raw horsepower hidden beneath his riding mower's hood, he cranked the throttle and ripped the steering wheel hard. He was absolutely right about the torque, but completely wrong about basic traction. The machine snapped sideways, violently throwing him squarely onto his back in the wet mud. The runaway mower then embarked on a relentless solo journey, executing a brutal massacre on his wife's beloved collection of 20 ceramic garden gnomes. 25. Building your own extreme backyard amusement park is generally frowned upon by insurance companies for very obvious reasons. A zealous enthusiast decided to construct a massive zip line from his high deck to a sturdy tree using discount steel cable and a flimsy plastic laundry pulley he found on clearance. His highly anticipated maiden voyage was terribly brief. The absolute second his full body weight hit the line, the cheap plastic pulley literally exploded into flying shrapnel. He plummeted 10 feet straight down, landing heavily and incredibly awkwardly in a meticulously arranged, highly jagged decorative rock garden. 26. Late-night teenage stealth missions rarely go according to plan, especially when basic structural architecture is completely ignored. Trying to sneak back into his dark house well past curfew, a kid opted to bypass the locked front door and scale the decorative wooden trellis attached to the porch. He apparently forgot that flimsy wooden slats designed to support delicate vines absolutely cannot handle the weight of a heavy teenager. The entire wooden structure ripped violently away from the brick wall. He crashed heavily onto the concrete patio with enough concussive force to wake up 3 adjacent zip codes. 27. Calling a professional plumber definitely costs money, but amateur fixes will ultimately cost you your complete sanity. A stubborn homeowner loudly declared that tradesmen were ripping him off, confidently grabbing a heavy-duty can of expanding industrial spray foam to patch a slightly leaky bathroom pipe. He pumped the entire pressurized can inside. The thick foam did aggressively stop the water leak, but it kept continuously expanding with absolute demonic energy. It traveled blindly through the dark plumbing, backed up entirely into his system, and eventually erupted forcefully out of his toilet bowl like a cursed, slowly hardening beige volcano. 28. Balancing a heavily wobbling ceiling fan is a delicate process, but one arrogant homeowner decided to skip the tiny factory weights and use heavy lead fishing sinkers secured entirely with cheap duct tape. He proudly cranked the speed to maximum to test his absolute genius engineering. The immense centrifugal force immediately ripped the heavy lead chunk clean off the spinning blade. It launched across the living room exactly like a lethal metal ninja star, shattering the front glass of his expensive 100-gallon saltwater aquarium and instantly flooding his pristine hardwood floors with confused fish and extreme regret. 29. Every single Thanksgiving, local fire departments desperately beg citizens not to do this exact thing. But some people view basic safety warnings as a personal insult. Scoffing at the slow concept of thawing poultry, a guy dropped a completely frozen, rock-solid turkey straight into a massive vat of wildly boiling peanut oil. The chemical reaction between thick ice and boiling grease was completely instantaneous. A violent explosion launched a 20-foot pillar of roaring flames straight up, instantly melting all his plastic patio furniture into puddles. The absolute best part is that the turkey remained completely raw on the inside. 30. When it comes to setting off highly explosive materials, more is definitely not always better. Deciding to forcefully put on an unforgettable grand finale at a block party, a group piled their entire arsenal of heavy mortar fireworks onto a single, incredibly flimsy plastic folding table. When they lit the first massive shell, the aggressive downward recoil immediately tipped the entire launch tube completely sideways. The subsequent heavy artillery fired perfectly horizontally directly into the gathered crowd, instantly transforming a relaxing summer barbecue into a chaotic, screaming war zone straight out of a big-budget Hollywood action movie. 31. We all desperately want to get absolutely every last drop out of a healthy breakfast, but standard heavy kitchen appliances are completely unforgiving. Wanting to fiercely push a stubborn chunk of frozen fruit down into his high-speed blender, a man confidently decided to use a long wooden spoon while the razor-sharp blades were still spinning at maximum velocity. The powerful machine instantly grabbed the wooden utensil, ripped it violently out of his hand, and viciously chewed it to pieces. In exactly 2 seconds, his expensive morning smoothie was completely transformed into a highly dangerous, incredibly fibrous wooden splinter soup. 32. Trying to successfully capture breathtaking extreme sports footage usually requires proper structural engineering, not just a rotting sheet of plywood and a quick prayer. A brave mountain biker hyped himself up to hit a sketchy makeshift ramp built directly over the body of his trusting friend who was lying flat on the dirt. Right at the critical apex of the launch, the flimsy wood completely splintered and gave way. Instead of soaring majestically over his buddy, the heavy rider plummeted straight downward, executing a brutal piledriver that planted his spinning front tire squarely into his friend's ribs. 33. Hollywood action movies have boldly lied to us for decades, and one incredibly frustrated homeowner learned that hard lesson in the most destructive way structurally possible. Having totally misplaced the tiny metal key to his garden shed, he proudly announced he was simply going to blast the lock off with a loaded 12-gauge shotgun. Firing aggressively from 10 feet away, he definitely succeeded in totally vaporizing the heavy padlock. However, the massive blast of buckshot also completely destroyed the wooden door, shattered the entire frame, and absolutely obliterated an expensive gas-powered weed whacker hanging on the interior wall. 34. Buying heavy military surplus tactical gear online often leads to incredibly poor, highly painful decision-making. Exceptionally proud of his brand-new Kevlar vest, a guy aggressively demanded his buddy shoot him squarely in the chest with a high-powered paintball gun from a completely unreasonable distance of 5 feet. What this backyard tactical genius totally failed to calculate was the brutal reality of raw kinetic energy. The paint round didn't pierce the tough armor, but the extreme blunt force trauma hit him exactly like a swinging sledgehammer. It left a horrifying welt and knocked the oxygen completely out of his lungs. 35. Powered strictly by the absolute, blinding arrogance that only a massive plastic bottle of incredibly cheap vodka can provide, a college student loudly swore he possessed the raw strength to punch a massive hole straight through the living room wall. After gently tapping around to falsely ensure he was hitting hollow drywall, he wound up and delivered a monstrous swing. Unfortunately, his drunken aim was slightly off. He completely missed the empty section and connected forcefully with a solid wooden structural support stud. The sharp, terrifying crack of shattering knuckles immediately shut down the party music. 36. Spending the day fishing is supposed to be relaxing, right up until your expensive line gets horribly tangled deep inside the reel. Completely losing all his remaining patience, one angry angler aggressively decided the absolute best method to fix a severe knot was to violently whip the heavy rod back and forth. In his blind, raging frustration, he completely forgot about the massive, triple-barbed lure dangling at the very end. The tough knot gave way abruptly, sending the sharp lure flying forcefully backward until all 3 rusty metal hooks embedded themselves incredibly deeply, right into his own left earlobe. 37. Enjoying extreme winter sports is great, but casually substituting expensive recreational equipment with random heavy junk from the garage is violently asking for trouble. A group of thrill-seekers ripped the massive steel hood completely off an old junked sedan, using it as a heavyweight toboggan to absolutely bomb down a steep, snow-covered hill. They easily achieved absolutely terrifying speeds, totally unaware that the bottom of the slope was guarded by a deeply unforgiving barbed wire fence. The rusty wire acted exactly like an industrial cheese grater, brutally shredding both the heavy steel car part and their incredibly expensive winter jackets. 38. Gutter cleaning is a tedious chore, prompting one impatient homeowner to forcefully speed up the process using a high-powered commercial gas pressure washer while precariously balancing on a slick aluminum ladder. He aimed the powerful nozzle into the rotting leaves and squeezed the heavy trigger. The violent, unexpected backwards recoil of the massive water pressure instantly pushed him completely off the top rung. He flew backward through the damp autumn air and crashed spectacularly straight through his own closed glass patio door, completely covering his expensive living room carpet in shattered glass and wet, filthy roof sludge. 39. Maintaining a clean vehicle is a true sign of pride, But blindly blasting highly sensitive electrical components with heavy machinery is absolute, undeniable madness. Obsessed with getting his dusty engine bay to shine exactly like it just rolled off the factory floor, a guy eagerly fired up a commercial-grade, incredibly high-pressure power washer. He went absolutely wild under the hood, successfully ripping off every single paper warning label and violently severing multiple delicate sensor wires. He relentlessly pushed gallons of water directly into the main electronic computer, instantaneously transforming a perfectly reliable automobile into a very shiny driveway ornament. 40. Deeply convinced he still possessed the raw, untamed athleticism of a high school gymnast, an overly confident dad decided to personally test out his kid's brand new backyard trampoline. Holding a half-empty aluminum can, he proudly announced he was going to execute a flawless, massive backflip. He aggressively double-bounced himself, caught entirely too much terrifying altitude, and completely cleared the heavy protective safety netting. He sailed majestically over the wooden fence and plummeted squarely into the neighbor's open plastic garbage dumpster, which was absolutely overflowing with rotting, foul-smelling summer trash. 41. Working the incredibly slow night shift in a massive, totally empty warehouse often rapidly leads to terrible, highly destructive ideas. Staring intently at an enormous industrial floor buffer, one deeply bored employee loudly proclaimed it was basically just an oversized motorized skateboard. He boldly stood squarely on top of the heavily spinning machine and actually balanced for about 5 wobbly, terrifying seconds. Then, the insane, untamed torque violently bucked him off right onto the hard concrete. The now unmanned rogue buffer instantly took off on a high-speed rampage, spinning wildly until it completely demolished a massive pyramid of industrial paint cans. 42. The incredibly common phrase claiming it is just a rental is universally recognized as the direct prequel to an incredibly expensive, highly painful disaster. Brimming with totally dangerous overconfidence, an arrogant tourist on a rented jet ski spotted the massive, steeply rolling wake of a passing passenger ferry and aggressively gunned the throttle. He hit the massive wall of heavy water at the absolute worst possible angle. The massive impact violently launched the watercraft completely vertical high into the sky, bucking him off immediately. The jet ski then executed a flawless backflip before slamming brutally back onto the surface upside down. 43. Important wildlife warning signs heavily posted at national parks are not gentle suggestions. They are desperate pleas to keep you completely alive. Totally obsessed with capturing the absolute perfect vacation selfie, a tourist kept quietly shuffling closer and closer to a massive, heavily grazing wild bison. This is an animal that is basically 2,000 pounds of solid muscle and deep-seated anger issues. Finally having completely enough of her annoying flashing camera, the giant beast casually lowered its massive head and violently punted her. She and her expensive smartphone went rapidly flying through the air in completely opposite directions. 44. Large livestock handling requires extreme caution and deep, unwavering respect. 2 vital things entirely absent from this particular Sunday afternoon. Deeply frustrated that a massive, wildly stubborn bull absolutely refused to walk into a different pasture, an impatient farmer boldly climbed into the enclosure. He decided to give the giant beast a firm, deeply physical shove right from behind. The annoyed bull simply turned its massive head and responded quickly with a gentle, totally effortless push of its own. The farmer was instantly launched completely airborne, violently plummeting face-first directly into a massive, highly steaming pile of pure agricultural waste. 45. Becoming a totally professional tattoo artist takes many long years of rigorous apprenticeship. But one misguided soul thought he could easily bypass all that with $30 and a terrible internet connection. Armed with a dangerously cheap, aggressively buzzing electric tattoo machine ordered online, he decided to give his own bare arm an incredibly intricate permanent sleeve. Unfortunately, his raw artistic talent was completely non-existent. The very first aggressive, shaky line he etched deeply into his own skin looked absolutely nothing like a ferocious dragon, and everything like the jagged EKG readout of a man actively having a severe heart attack. 46. Removing old, deeply rooted tree stumps heavily stuck in the yard is brutal, deeply backbreaking labor. This is exactly why one guy confidently turned to highly unstable, completely unregulated explosives. He furiously packed the tough wood with an absolutely terrifying amount of specialized removal powder he found on the internet. When he finally triggered the heavy charge, it did significantly more than just gently loosen the roots. The violent blast rapidly launched a solid 10-pound chunk of hardwood high into the neighborhood sky, exactly like a chaotic cannonball, smashing violently straight through his totally innocent neighbor's fragile bathroom window. 47. Deeply frustrated that his heavily soaked, incredibly expensive smartphone was completely unresponsive after a quick drop in the toilet, a backyard genius ignored all basic logic and decided the kitchen microwave was a highly efficient drying machine. He aggressively punched the defrost setting and hit start. Instead of gently evaporating the moisture, the high-frequency radiation instantly summoned a terrifying, localized lightning storm inside the glass box. The phone's lithium battery violently detonated with a deafening crack, completely frying the expensive appliance, vaporizing the phone, and instantly tripping every single electrical breaker in the dark house. 48. Stuffy corporate office environments rapidly breed a very specific, deeply bored type of total stupidity. In a desperate, highly misguided bid to become an absolute workplace legend, a guy confidently bet his gathered co-workers he could smash his face aggressively onto the heavy glass of the giant commercial photocopier. He promised to keep his eyes completely wide open during the slow scan. He slammed the lid down and boldly hit print. The incredibly intense, deeply blinding light of the sweeping electronic laser instantly fried his corneas. Temporarily completely blind and panicking wildly, he stumbled rapidly backward and crashed through the lobby's massive decorative plant. 49. Thoroughly understanding the complex concept of vehicle ground clearance is pretty vital if you intend to ever leave the total safety of neatly paved roads. Driving an incredibly low-slung, highly expensive rear-wheel drive sports car, an arrogant driver scoffed heavily at the deep ruts on a muddy trail. He confidently decided he could easily follow his buddy's heavily lifted off-road vehicle. He made it exactly 20 completely pathetic feet before his expensive carbon fiber undercarriage completely bottomed out. The heavy car instantly sank heavily up to its shiny axles in deeply unforgiving muck, completely immobilized while his friend just laughed hysterically. 50. Highly questionable backyard engineering is a truly beautiful thing, right up until the heavy, completely unregulated artillery gets involved. After weeks of furiously building a genuinely massive PVC pipe potato cannon powered by highly combustible hairspray, the arrogant creator decided the absolute best way to properly test its raw power was to shoot it directly at his own wooden shed. What this amateur weapons contractor totally ignored was the violently aggressive force of pure recoil. The massive cannon kicked backward exactly like an angry mule, violently snapping his fragile collarbone and tossing him backward. The potato simply sailed gracefully right over the roof. All right, time to expose yourself. Which of these spectacular failures closely resembles your own husband, or worse, you? Roast yourself in the comments right now, because we all know you've done something just as aggressively stupid. Drop a like, hit subscribe, and definitely stay away from power tools until the next video.